But now, last but not least, we have Szabolcs Szekacs. He's one of the fathers of this conference and also one of the initiators of this whole framework. So it's great to welcome you on stage. You're now a policy officer at the DG Internal Market at the European Commission, and you used to be 8 years working for the ISA program, initiating from open source to different programs. Now you were responsible for the sharing and reuse program, so I think the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Good morning, everyone. I don't know about you, but I got very inspired by the speeches of our distinguished guests from Portugal, as well as our Director General, Gertrude, only to be crushed by Tony, who said that if there's no resistance, then something we are not doing right. So during the development of this framework, also the conference and also the awards, we only received cautious, let's say, support both from the member states and also from our colleagues. So clearly we are not doing something right if there's no good resistance. I'm here today to present you a little bit about the initiatives, the thinking behind the sharing and reuse framework, and to present you the framework itself and what are plans with it in the future. Okay, I think this is a bit the old version of my presentation, unless I also clicked something. Yeah, okay, so this is the new version. I just changed the order of the slides. So how does sharing and reuse link to building digital single market? In 2015, the digital single market strategy had a vision a vision to extend the single market to the digital area. And among a number of important things, such as concluding, let's say, a common copyright regulation, to reform copyright regulation, to, let's say, modernize roaming, mobile roaming across member states, to get access to digital content when you're traveling. It also talked about and also envisioned how public services should function in the future. And it called for public services which are digital by default, which are open and transparent, which can be used cross-border and which reuse data across borders, and which are interoperable, which reuse data which is already there, either in the public sector or in the private sector, so the citizens don't have to re-enter the same information again and again every time, which are accessible to everyone and include everyone, and which are secure and can be trusted. It also called for a plan to implement these services and to help member states to implement such services. This is a famous e-government action plan which started in 2016 and will end in 2020. And it also reiterated these concepts of what makes public services modern, but also went a step further. And on one hand, it identified activities that should help us reach this, let's say, paradise, and also identified what are the tools that we need to build such services. And it asked for common standards, technical specifications, as common digital rules. It also said that we need to develop common technical building blocks that can be used across borders to develop public services. And we need to have some common services across Europe that can help national governments and regional governments to develop services. It also called for the renewal of the European Interoperable framework, which has been just adopted recently. And that framework goes a bit further, because the action plan only talked about, and the strategy only talked about, that services needs to be interoperable. But it was the framework that went a bit further and said, okay, what does it mean to be interoperable? What are the principles that administration should follow? And I would highlight just two principles here. One is openness. And it's defined that the framework on three levels. You have to use try to open up your data as much as possible. You have to have, let's say, open software. You have to take into account the use of open software. You have to have I think, level playing field. That's the expression that the framework uses. And you also have to open up your services so that they can be reused by other services, either in the public sector or in the private one. But apart from the EU policy context, of course, sharing and reusing common solutions also makes common sense, business sense. So local administrations, as you can see in the afternoon and this morning, we had over 100 nominations from public administrations that shared and reused solutions. Most of them didn't do it because of some EU policy. They did it because it made business sense. It helped them to get the services either faster to the market, to provide them faster, save some costs. Tony said that it's not that important, but for some public administrations it can be pretty important in the long term, and also to sustain their services in the long term. So if it's all great, so if it's in the policy, it can help us create a digital single market, and it makes common business sense. Why don't we do it? Why are we still here in this conference? What's the problem? The problem is that there are a lot of barriers that prevent us doing it. Awareness of available solutions, of the needs of other administrations, that what we develop for ourselves are not supporting multilingual different languages, and they're not reusable, they're not scalable or extendable. And also some bad practices in procurement. I think that in the afternoon you will hear more about this from our colleague Rodolphe. There are also legal issues, some of which are around licensing compatibilities, and also lack of common terminology. I will go quickly through of what is the history of the framework. So it didn't start in a vacuum fluctuation. We had many policies around the concept of sharing and reuse, many guidelines on the lower level and other instruments, and we had also a number of programs that directly funded common solutions to be used in public services. I will skip this because I think I'm a bit getting late. But all of these initiatives in the last 10 years, 15 years, led to the realization that probably a common sharing and reuse framework could be of value for public administrations to give, let's say, generic guidance. So, after all this introduction, let me just introduce you to the framework itself. So what is the framework? How can it help you? It is for all public administrations at all levels of government, and it has a number of recommendations to help them create reusable IT solutions and benefit from those which are already available and used by others. It should be used at all development stages of IT solutions and at all levels of public administrations. So on one hand, it identifies some barrier types. But what is more important is that it includes 10 key recommendations that can be used by any administration at any level of government, from local municipalities to cross-national organizations. However, we realized and understood that generic recommendations, different organizations have different capabilities, either technical capabilities, as Miguel said, or access to legal expertise. So we need to differentiate, and we designed certain recommended measures which are specifically aimed at central bodies to help their administrations implement these recommendations. And finally, we also included 16 supporting instruments. They're really practical tools that can help implement these recommendations. I'll give you just one example throughout this chain of recommendations and good practices. For example, to overcome the legal barriers, one of the key recommendations is that public administrations should reuse licenses as much as possible. They should not create their own specific licenses when sharing solutions. Okay, but we realize that local municipality has perhaps a difficulty to select the proper license. They don't have the expertise. So one of the 13 recommended measures for central bodies is to set up a list of recommended licenses that were checked nationally, and local municipalities can be sure that this is good to use. We're fine. We're covered. And also to provide consultancy services, perhaps, on legal matters, IPR matters for their administration, so that each municipality doesn't need to keep one legal expert, although some of the lawyers would be very happy to be employed, but this is not the point. And we also included around this aspect supporting instruments such as the European Union public license, which is a common license that can be used by anyone, especially public administrations, to share software. And also on Join Up we have a service on around licensing. So we have actually a lawyer that can help any European public administrations around licensing issues. Ha! I did it too. Okay. I think it's the last slide. Okay. Yeah, that's it. So just one slide. We tried not to create a document, a framework that you can put on the shelf, and tried not to make it static. In fact, it's not a theoretical work. It's based on best practices that we learned of from policies, national policies, business and governance models, and from best practices also from some of the awards that some of the nominations that you will hear about during the awards ceremony. We also created this conference to allow you to share experiences and learn from each other, and also created awards to learn from best practices. The framework itself will be put online and extended with additional instruments from communities, from member states. So I would encourage you to get in touch with us. We will send you a nice email. And if you're aware of any business models, any instruments, anything that can be shared and can be learned from, please don't hesitate to share it with us. We really want to create a community around this framework with case studies, with best practices, with instruments that can help any administration to better share and reuse. And by the way, you won't get away with it not reading the framework, because it's also on your USB key.